I just out of curiosity, like, do you support things like school choice?
Um, no, because school choice is kind of a creation meant to replace public education, and public education is one of the best things this country ever did, even if it did it for the wrong reasons. But like, um, so no, I think that school choice is actually kind of an example of what we were talking about before, of like, in order to have school choice, you have to diminish public schools, and that in fact is the purpose. And so
Well,
that's why I can't
the
be
only
for it.
way the only way it can diminish public schools is if public schools aren't offering a better product, right? The only reason people would then
No,
choose to
I
go
don't think
someplace
that
else is
that's
because the
I
schools are
don't
failing.
I don't think that's logical. No, I'm sorry. I don't think that logic works. Like, that's, what do you mean?
Well, because it's just kind of going back to what we were just talking about, like this idea of being able to decouple, like right, like if you have black kids going to some like really rundown, shoddy inner city school, I don't see why you wouldn't say like, well, hey, parents, here's the money we normally tax and spend on the school system. We're just going to give it to you directly to raise your kids as you think is best. So I just don't see how on one side we can be like, oh well, we should be able to decouple, and then the other side be like, well, no, we need to be forced to participate in these systems.
Well, I already said that we're not going to be allowed to decouple. Like, whether we get school choice and you're allowed to send your student to another school, you're never going to decouple. Like, that is not going to result in a decoupling. Um,
I mean, but it's a step in the right direction, though, is it not?
I don't think so, and that's exactly what I said, brother.
But okay, but you're saying people won't let us to decouple, right? And then I'm saying, well, we can at least decouple right now in this way, and you're saying you won't allow it. So I'm like, but are you not then the person preventing us from decoupling?
I am not in support of decoupling because I know it's a losing strategy. Okay? So, the same way somebody who would look at other people doing the wrong thing, that's the person that I believe I am right now. I don't think it's a winning strategy for the country. It's a losing strategy for the country for many citizens, I believe. I don't think it will result in better outcomes for Americans. So that's why, as somebody who's worked in the education system for almost 20 years, that's my perspective. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about why I have it.
Um, well, I mean, I do. I mean, if you could just explain some more about why you think that's better, because my understanding is like both private schools and homeschooling yield better outcomes than public schools, and they're far, far less expensive. So
That's
it's
not
really
true.
hard for me to like
That's not
see a downside of allowing people to pursue other things.
I mean, that's not true, right? Like, there's the religious schools, right? There's the independent schools. There's the charters that get partial public funding, and then there's the elite private schools that people are paying tens of thousands of dollars to send their kids to. So, like, you know, all of those different types of schools are getting various different types of outcomes, and um, that's the reality of the situation. So you can't really make a broad statement about private schools like that.
Well, I mean, there is some data to support it, but even just speaking from, my little anecdotal experience here, we initially sent our kid to a private school, right? It was a nice school, and it didn't break our living below the poverty line at the time. And it was like we were helped by some credits from our local district for doing that. Um, so, and we would like other people to be able to pursue that as well if they wanted to. But on the other side, we also tried public schools until we ultimately determined that homeschooling was the best. Um, but so it's kind of like I've seen all the various aspects. This is about like I'm married. My wife went to college for education. So I'm not totally disconnected from uh, what it is. And I so if maybe you could just like expand a little more on why you think we need to be kind of like coerced even into propping up a system that just doesn't seem to be working for people, or at the very least, like, let the market handle it, let the best schools survive, and the other ones, like, just they're not serving a purpose other than maybe, like glorified daycares in a lot of instances.
First of all, the system is working for millions of people. So we can't just say that the system isn't working. That is demonstrably untrue. Um, Obviously, the literacy rates in this country and the mathematics comprehension rates in the country have been dropping for literally decades, continuously. So, like, ultimately, my perspective is on it, having worked in the system at various levels and different capacities, that the government views public education a certain way. It views it in terms of markets, and that's actually part of the problem. And it seems to pervade your mind space as well, in terms of like, you don't believe that, let's let the market take care of it and let's let some schools fail and this and that. Like, I don't know what would lead you to believe that that would help anything. Um, I don't know why. I can't understand that point of view because what happens then? Some schools fail. We let some schools, and then what? Like,
Well,
it's
if the bad schools fail, we get better schools,
I.
right? I
How
don't
does that
understand
work?
why we should be propping up something that isn't providing the value that people are paying into it. Because, as you said, like, our test scores have been bottoming out for like decades now, and yet we keep spending more and more money on the system that is continually producing worse outcomes than their private counterparts.
But
Um,
we're not spending
and
more and
above
more.
and beyond that, right? Like, that's the economic argument,
But
but I
hang
also have
on,
a
brother.
scientific
Let's get the
argument for
reality
that.
first, which is
The
that
notion that
we're
we
not
have,
continuously pouring money into education. A lot of states keep continuously making cuts to education, or the increases in funding are always substantially less than what the system actually needs in order to operate and function correctly. And so they know that they're underfunding education, like they're purposefully and have been for a long time underfunding it, on purpose to make sure that it fails. That's what the government
but
has
you
been, so that we can then
but you
turn
can't,
to school choice. So that's exactly what's going on. Like, you're just following the path
but you
that the government has laid for you, brother.
well, no, because it doesn't check out. Because if they're underfunding public schools, it doesn't stand when private schools are less expensive than the public schools. Like, the public schools are spending more per child than the private schools do. And with that being the case, you cannot say that the funding for the public schools is undervalued. Um,
I mean,
um,
I'm saying it based
and then
on the
another,
fact that, like, there is an ask by the systems that run public education. They specify this is what we need to make it run. The government, like in my state of North Carolina, literally put caps on the amount of money that they can offer for the education system, and they've lowered the caps over time. And the amount of money that they earmark for education is never what the ask is. It's always less, and so cuts always have to be made at the public level, and it happens year after year, budget after budget after budget. Like, that's what happens. I'm not making it up. Like, this is the reality of how the system is operating right now, and you can look that up on your own and find that information.
well, I'm just thinking, if if I put myself in the shoes of a consumer, and I'm going out for dinner one night, and I've got two restaurants, and one restaurant's food is crappy and expensive, and I've got another restaurant option where food's pretty good and less expensive, I'm probably going to go to the second restaurant, right? And that's kind of how I view what's going on with the schools. It's like, why am I going to pay more for something that's not as good as the less expensive counterpart? Especially when, if we did redirect that funds into the market for other options, you're going to get more of that option, right? Yeah, like, if we subsidize, like, say, charter schools, you're going to get more of these charter schools. Um, And then there's also the scientific point I'd make about this, the idea that we have this top-down structure coming straight from the federal government. And as you said, state budgets are in fact cutting back, but that's only because the federal government is taking more and more of the local school district's budget. They're giving out more and more money.
That's
And
that's not the reason.
in exchange, those schools have to then turn around and teach whatever the federal government tells them to teach. They kind of lose a little bit of freedom there. And this kind of goes back to that whole idea of decoupling. And it's also concerning because I don't necessarily know, right? Like if you say like your experience is different from mine, like I don't know that the people living in like a majority black inner city school or is what the people learning in rural Alabama need to be learning, right? So you've kind of got this like in science, science needs competition too. It's not just like the market. Science needs competition too. So I think people need to have the freedom in their own districts to decide for themselves what they need to teach their children in order for the children to be successful.
Okay, I hear you. I don't agree with that. I don't think that parents are equipped to understand what their children need to be successful. That's my having met many a parent of many a student.
That's actually a very good point because it's true. They're like there are probably some parents. I mean, I'm sure there's probably quite a few that just do not trust themselves to be able to do that well enough. But it kind of goes like, right. I mean, we could go back and forth with that for a long time because then I could be like, okay, well, maybe we've got pod schooling. It's like there is help. There is help for people. And I think, right. I think we both can agree, like just in general, maybe society should focus more on children than say bombs.
I agree with you there, brother. Somehow we always find the money for bombs, and no, and people
Yep.
rarely question it. Like billions and billions of dollars just show up out of nowhere, and people don't complain. But as soon as we talk about funding education, it's like, well, where's the money going to come from? Look how much we're spending, this and that. But like, no one seems to care that we're spending billions all the time on weapons. All I can do,
Yeah.
I can't do anything about that part. All I can do is create space for us to talk about these issues, like I'm doing. I'm glad that you've been open and honest with your viewpoints.